Hello, in this week's video we're going to be talking about how to shoot in manual mode. Now whether you're a beginner or whether you want to become a bit braver, there's two really good reasons why you want to start shooting in manual mode. Firstly, your pictures or your images and video look so much better, and secondly, you have full control over everything you want to do. So in order to explain this, the first part of this video is set up with this weird light over the head type thing that I thought in my head would be a good idea. But I'm like looking at the television screen now and it looks a little bit like I'm in a lineup. Like I've been in trouble for something. Look to the side, please. Cool, you've got a really pointy nose, haven't you? Yeah, thanks very much for telling me something I don't already know, you funny fuck. So this video is not specifically intended for photography or video, and I think what I'm going to take you through, which is just the basics, are the fundamentals of what you need to know in order to get started in manual mode. I don't want to overload you with loads of stuff. I have more information to give you in later videos, which I'll produce, but I don't want to bombard you on this one. Now I'm guessing for many of you out there, you've been using auto mode for quite a long time, and auto mode is okay up until a point. So when you set your camera into manual mode, you'll be confronted with three key and fundamental settings. These are your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed. Now on the surface, what all of these three settings do in effect is make your images lighter or darker. You adjust your ISO, it will make it lighter and darker. You do the same with your aperture and your shutter speed. They will all make your images lighter and darker. However, it gets a lot more complicated than that. But don't worry, I'm just going to take you through the very basics today. Now, just before we get started properly, I just want to explain what settings I've got on my camera shooting this at the moment. So I'm shooting at 25 frames per second with an aperture of f4 and a shutter speed of 50 frames per second. And my ISO is at 800. But don't worry about that. If you watch this video back again, you may understand that more in the future, but you don't really need to worry about that at the moment, okay? Right, let's get started with the first one, which is ISO. I'm starting with this one because it's the easiest one to explain. It is just the sensitivity of the sensor. So the higher the number goes, the more sensitive it will become to light, which will mean that it'll also pick up other pieces of stuff hitting the sensor, like ultraviolet stuff and bits and bobs, which will make your film look grainy. So we try to keep the ISO as low as possible. But what I'm going to do now is adjust the ISO on the camera that you're looking at me through, and hopefully this side of the image you'll start to see, and maybe me, become a little bit more grainy. But in order to do that, I just need to adjust my camera to make it look artificially a little bit darker. Unfortunately, I've got my phone, I can do it from my phone. So okay, so I've dropped us down. So we're looking quite dark now. So what I'm going to do, I already explained my ISO is at 800 because it's quite dark in here, and I've made it intentionally dark to explain the ISO in the first place. And what I'm going to do is start increasing the ISO. So we're going to go from 800 to 1600. So this is now at 1600, but it still looks absolutely fine. And now we're at 3200. We'll go up to 6400. 12,800 and 25,600. So maybe now you can see I'm a lot brighter, but there may be a little bit more noise here on me and on the wall and everything that you can see. But sensors in modern cameras are so good these days that you don't really pick up too much background noise, and actually it's more often than not it's pretty good to take your ISO all the way up to about 3,200, and you won't really notice any real differences in the quality of your image. And I think as beginners, yeah, let's bump that ISO up, don't worry about it. So the second thing I want to talk about is shutter speed. Now I think this is a lot easier to explain. If it's photography, it's basically how long light's going to hit the sensor through the lens. So imagine my face is the sensor and you've got some shutters, and let's forget about mirrored or mirrorless cameras, don't worry about that. But basically you've got your shutters, my face is the sensor, and it's how long they're open and closed for. And in photography you can go from like thousandths of a second if you want to capture the moment. It's fast moving and it will capture it like really sharp and clear. Or if you're doing landscape photography, it may be that you want to have a shutter speed of several seconds, so therefore it would be open to take in all the light and then close it again. Now when it comes to video, it's a lot more simple. So the way you set your shutter speed, it is the rule. Now the rule is your shutter speed needs to be at least twice that of your frame rate. So as I've got my camera set on 25 frames per second, my shutter speed needs to be 50 per second, and it's as simple as that. You can take it higher, and I've used it on a couple of occasions, like with my GoPro. We went out there and I didn't have a filter or anything like that to try and darken it, so what I did is I increased my shutter speed so that it darkened down the film. So generally speaking, shutter speed is generally set by your frame per second, so that's really nice and easy to know. The last thing that I want to talk about is aperture. Now all that means is the size of the hole in your lens, and you can make it bigger or smaller. So of course when it's bigger it will let in more light, and when it's smaller it will let in less light. But why would you want to alter the size of your aperture? Well, basically it comes down to depth of field. Now depth of field is all of your shot that's going to be in focus. You've got your focal lengths, and so that's all it is without getting complicated. So when you have a low f number, your depth of field is going to be narrower. So what that will mean is, say for example, I'm focusing it on my face, all of the background will be slightly blurred, and maybe you're getting a little bit on this because you can see my face, it's very in focus, but the background back there is a little bit out of focus because it's f4. I've got a fairly large hole in my lens, so where the camera's focusing on my face, but the background goes a bit blurry. But if I was to make the f number smaller and go up to f8 or f16, everything would be in focus. Now again, the nice thing for videography is that we like that blurry background thing. It looks a bit snazzy and a bit cool. So generally speaking, we try to go for the widest aperture that we can. So what we're going to do is do a bit of a test. I'm going to put this lens on my M50 and we're going to do a little test just so you can see the difference of what that f number does. So for the purposes of this experiment, I've set up my Canon M50 and I've got two willing helpers to do this, and they are Tigger and Mickey, and I've got the Canon M50 set up there all ready to go. So what I'm going to show you now is the effect of aperture in a very basic sort of starter beginner type fashion, but I'm going to need some help. Jay, would you be able to help me film this so people can see what I'm doing and stuff? So I've got my M50 here, and I'm going to set it up to take a picture. So this is just photographs for this example, but the same applies if you're doing video. So you can see I've got my screen here, I've got my two subjects, Mickey and Tigger, and you can see at the bottom my settings are a shutter speed of 1/100th of a second because I don't really want any camera shake. To get the light up, I've got ISO 1000 because I've set an f number of 1.8, so we've got a very big hole which is letting in loads of light, and you can see as I adjust this f number it gets darker and darker and darker. That's why I always go for my aperture first, because I know what I want it to look like. I'm going to focus in on Tigger here. I'm going to take a shot. There we go. So you can see Tigger is clearly in focus and Mickey there is being left out. But what I'm going to do is adjust the ISO to try and bring it all in focus. And I think I'm going to have to bring it down quite a lot. So I'm going to bring it down to f8. But you can see what's happened there is the image has got a lot darker. Now, I don't want to change my shutter speed because I don't want to induce any more shake than I need to. So that needs to stay the same. So the only thing that I've got left to do that will make the picture brighter is to turn up my ISO. So I shall turn up my ISO until it looks roughly good. This is probably ordinarily too high compared to what I want it to. In fact, we might even need to go up to f16 on this one because I'm so close to Tigger. This might not be working. And you can see there, I've just taken the picture and they're both in focus. I think the most important thing to start with, particularly with videography, is start off with your aperture. What's the look that you're going for? And generally speaking, we like to go for a bit of a narrow depth of field. So set your f number nice and low. Secondly, what's the lighting like? Are you getting enough lighting on that f number? If you're indoors, generally speaking, you have to put the ISO up to about, maybe up to around 800. If you're outside, you can take it down to right down to 100. depending on what the day's like. If it's overcast, yeah, you might need to go up to 200. Sometimes when it's really dark and horrible, like it has been here in the UK for most of the last 6 months, then you might even need to put it up to 800. If you're going to get started, start off with your aperture, and I think for videography, set it nice and low. For photography, if you're doing portraiture and taking pictures of items, a low number is quite good. If you want to take pictures of buildings and landscapes, you're going to have a higher F number, which means a smaller hole, which means less light, because you're going to get more in focus. That will mean that you'll need to consider what your shutter speed is going to be and your ISO. I know it's all really, really complicated, but I hope I've given you the basics to get you started. If there are any questions that you want to ask, and by the way, there are loads more tutorials coming, so this is just a starter. And again, I didn't want to bombard you with loads and loads of stuff on this first one. I just wanted to get used to the concepts of ISO, aperture and shutter speed. That's it for this one. Now, like most modern cameras, there is a great tool to help you if you're a little bit unsure whether you're getting the right exposure or not. You can look at the histogram. Now, if you have a look at the screen, if you come in here and have a look, if you hit the info button here on the Canon M50 and cycle through, you get a histogram here, and you can see the picture. I mean, you can clearly see, you don't need to see the histogram to see this is too dark. But what you can do is adjust your settings. So in this case, I want to adjust my ISO, and you can see that now my histogram is showing that I've got a lot more light, and as long as it's between there and that last bar, you know that your picture is exposed correctly. When you look at your histogram, you know your settings, you know your depth of field, all of these things. If you keep it the same and you know you've set it the same way each time, then you'll get a more consistent look throughout your video. And just to finish up, because I think I've captured everything that I want to on this video, is just to remember, it's not scary, I promise, it really isn't. Just think, what frame rate are you shooting on? Double your shutter speed, that's set. The next thing is your aperture. For us videographers, we like a little bit of blurry background because it looks nicer. So again, put your F number down as low as you can, and then look at your histogram, look at the light, and if it's too light or too dark, that's when you adjust your ISO. It's just those 3 steps. It's not any more complicated than that, I promise. Okay? Right, that's it, I think, for this video. I think as some homework, if you're watching this video, I think your homework for this week is just to get your camera, chuck it into manual mode, be brave, have a play and see how you get on. And I'd love to know how you get on, so chuck those comments down below and I'll really look forward to reading them. As I mentioned before, there are going to be more tutorials coming out, going to some things in more depth, and I'm really looking forward to making these tutorials. I've been talking about it for ages, but I just haven't been able to get around to it. But I have a bit of time now, so I'm going to really try and crack on as much as I can. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to this channel and you've made it this far, then please consider subscribing, because I'm going to be producing loads more tutorials to get you up to speed and get you better doing what you love to do. And I'm also going to be creating my usual slightly random content as well. But I love doing this. It's so much fun. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Do you believe in magic? Here it's automatic. La la la, ooh. That future, that future, that future.